okay? She got me here. Okay. I'll trust that you can. Would you pray with me?
Can't hear.
And here. Sam, I need to get the other one.
I'm sorry?
They can't hear in the back. Do you
Oh.
need to get the other one?
No, wait, try it now.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
So much better. Okay, great. Would you pray with me? Lord, we come this morning to you and we ask that you would open our ears and open our hearts to receive the word that you have for us this morning. I ask that the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts would be pleasing in your sight. O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. As you can all hear, I have a frog in my throat. You have all prayed for my son Michael, and he is doing so much better, but he shared so well, and he gave the rest of our family the cold. So it is manifested in my voice. So thank goodness for a microphone, because there's no way I could shout this morning any louder than this. As many of you know, I have two boys, so Michael 3 that we prayed for, and Carl 6. Our family takes many road trips up to Sacramento because my family lives in Sacramento. And so my boys are usually pretty good in the car. It's about a 2.5 hour drive up there. But right about where we hit, after Stockton, where we hit that, I don't know how many of you have driven that on I-5, but that part where it just opens up and there's that bird preserve, and there's lots of grazing land and lots of farmland, and it's beautiful. And I get to that part and I just take a deep breath. I'm like, oh Lord, look at how beautiful this is. And my kids start screaming, how much longer? How much longer? And I say, oh, about 40 minutes. We're almost to Mom and Papa's house. It's okay. And they just can't handle it anymore. It's been too long in the car. So they're hitting each other and screaming, and I'm trying to distract. Look at the cows. Let's count how many cows there are. You know, let's play I Spy. Well, there's not much to spy. So we finally get there about 40 minutes later. But let me tell you, that last 40 minutes of the trip is usually, I'm like pulling out my hair, ready to pull over, get out of the car and scream myself. But we usually make it through okay. But what that reminded me of this morning as I thought of that was just that waiting gets so hard sometimes. And it doesn't matter if you're a young person on a road trip going, how much longer? How much longer? Screaming, hitting your brother. Or whether you are waiting for something more significant in your life. I just think that waiting is hard. It doesn't matter what we're waiting for. And we don't need to have two small boys screaming in a car to remind us of that. We wait for a lot of things in life. It seems like no matter what season of life we are in, waiting is kind of a constant companion. Kind of like my cup is going to be a constant companion this morning, so I don't lose my voice. When we are young, we wait to be, like I'm thinking about the kids down here, when we're young, we wait to be older and taller so we can like go on the rides at Disneyland, and we're old enough to do the things the big kids do. And then when we're older, a little bit older, we wait for love, and we wait for a spouse, we wait for a job that we really want. And then when we're even a little bit older, we wait for raises, we wait for our portfolios to mature so that when can I retire, right? How much longer? We look forward to those things that are good news. And there are times when we dread the wait for bad news. We wait for healing and health. We wait for relationships that might be broken to be reconciled. We wait for people we love to return. When those we love die, we wait for normal to return, only to realize that normal has changed. And so we wait for God to fill our emptiness and to help us through to the new normal. We wait for our prayers to be answered. we wait for Jesus. No matter who we are or what our life situations are, we are found waiting for something or someone. And I'm quite certain that each one of us, including myself, could name something significant that we are waiting for right now. Well, Jesus knew that waiting would be hard for us. He knew what it was to wait, and he knew it would be difficult for his disciples throughout all the ages to wait for his return, to wait for the restoration of God's kingdom when all would be made right. In our passage this morning from Luke 21 was primarily to the disciples of Jesus' day, but there is also a message in it for us. Jesus had words of encouragement, which really, they are words of exhortation, which is an emphatic encouragement. He really means it. It is an encouragement for them and for us in our waiting. So listen to his words with me now for how to wait well. Luke 21, verse 34 to 38. Be careful, or your hearts will be weighed down with dissipation, drunkenness, and the anxieties of life. And that day will close on you unexpectedly like a trap. For it will come on all those who live on the face of the whole earth. Be always on the watch and pray that you may be able to escape all that is about to happen, and that you may be able to stand before the Son of Man. Each day Jesus was teaching at the temple, and each evening he went out to spend the night on the hill called the Mount of Olives. And all the people came early in the morning to hear him at the temple. Our passage today comes at the end of the chapter, at the end of chapter 21. They were the concluding thoughts that Jesus was giving in a conversation that he had been having with his disciples regarding all that must come to pass before the kingdom is restored, or before, which also is a way of saying before Jesus returns, the second coming. So first, Jesus prophesied, I'm giving you a little history. First, Jesus prophesied that the temple was to be destroyed. Now, the temple was a place of incredible beauty and significance to the Jewish people. It's a place where they came to worship. It's a place where they gathered, where they gave sacrifices, where atonement was given for their sins. It was a holy place. And history tells us that Jesus' prophecy was fulfilled in AD 70 when the Romans they sacked Jerusalem and they destroyed the temple. Such a thing at the time of Jesus speaking would have been unfathomable to them. Still, with great authority, Jesus gave them signs to watch for also. Wars, revolutions, earthquakes, famines, plagues. If you go back to chapter 21 and look, all those things that Jesus lists are horrible things that they are to watch for, that these are the things that will precede him coming again. Jesus went on to prophesy further for things to expect, that the day of judgment would come unexpectedly like a trap on all who live on the face of the earth. It's a frightening implication, a trap. I suspect that Jesus used this imagery of a trap because it gives a visual that every one of us can understand. A trap is something that we all understand. When you're caught in it, you can't get out. Somebody has to release you from it. And it's something that will affect all people. So all people will be affected by the return of Jesus. You can't remove yourself from it. No one will be able to remove themselves from it. Only Jesus will come to remove us from the effects of the trap. So in essence, on that day of judgment, there will be no denying his return. It will be very obvious. And all will stand before Jesus, witnessing and feeling the effects of his presence. It says in chapter 21 that with his presence will come several things: justice, redemption, and glory. And all evil will be defeated, and love will reign. We've maybe seen the bumper stickers, love wins. That refers to this, that love will win. The wait will be over. That waiting for all to be set right will be over. And all will be right. So maybe you ask with me at this point, but when? When will this come? Well, Jesus was clear that it would be after the fall of the temple, but as we are told throughout the New Testament in several places, that only the Father knows the day and the hour of Jesus' return. Jesus described in Matthew that the day will come like a thief in the night, a surprise, or perhaps even a shock. Well, a long time has passed, 2,000 years to wait and counting. If my children can't handle a 2.5-hour drive to Sacramento, how does Jesus expect us to wait over 2,000 years for him? Well, I want to acknowledge something. We wait big picture for the coming of Jesus, but we also wait on a daily basis for Jesus. We wait for him to show up in our day-by-day living. I think that Jesus' words in this passage refer not only to the big picture of waiting, but also to this day-by-day waiting. It's not disconnected, for the way that we wait daily informs the way that we wait on a larger scale. What I mean is, how I wait in a long line, or on a long drive, or when I'm on hold with Kaiser forever because there's 300 other people in line waiting. That was me this weekend. How we wait on that scale informs how we wait on a bigger scale. How we wait on a smaller scale informs how we wait on a bigger scale. So how do I handle it? How do you handle it? Do we get impatient? Do we get angry? Do we get irritated? Frustrated? They're normal feelings. But what do we do with them? What do we do with our feelings? How do we handle that waiting? Whether it's waiting for something as significant as the second coming of Jesus, or as simple as the daily wait, it can be grueling. For as Jesus said throughout chapter 21, there has been and there is much to endure. We know this truth. History confirms it. Our own experiences confirm it. So he ends his conversation with an exhortation on how to wait well. It's like these final words in chapter 20 are in bold print, all caps. His urgency is palpable. He says, be on guard, stay alert, watch, and pray. So this is what we aren't supposed to miss. If there's anything you hear in this message as you wait for it to end, be on guard, stay alert, watch, and pray. I think the disciples needed this. Remember in Luke 22, it's right before Jesus is arrested. He goes up to the Mount of Olives in the evening and he wants to pray, and he asks his disciples, he says, stay here and wait while I go up and pray, and you pray too. So Jesus goes up and he prays, and when he returns to the disciples, do you remember how he found them? Asleep. Asleep. Not very watchful. He knew that they were going to have trouble, and he knew that they needed to be reminded to be on guard, to pay attention, and to pray. It is not this kind of waiting that Jesus is encouraging us to, is not a kind of sitting in your rocking chair, staring out the window, waiting for somebody to walk up your front step. It's an active, hopeful, anticipatory waiting of what God will do and what God is doing even now. I think this is not just a disciple issue that they fell asleep, but maybe a human issue. It's hard for us to wait. We all have trouble staying alert. I'm remembering a time when I was sitting in a college seminar class, and one of those big classrooms, like stadium seating, and my friend elbows me and she goes, "You were drooling." I didn't even know I'd fallen asleep. The reality is that we're all guilty of not paying attention sometime. Perhaps nodding off when someone is talking, you're doing this, but your mind is, you're not really there. You're not really paying attention. It's always happening, right? I don't know about you, but one of my greatest distractions is my phone, which I have left on that seat. And when I was writing this sermon, I had to put it in my boy's toy chest, cover it with blankets and close the lid because it kept buzzing and distracting me from writing this sermon. I think that our phones are sometimes tempting, right, to escape into a video or social media or connecting with people. I think I'm being alert and aware of what's going on around me, but in reality, I'm not actually focused on what's happening. I don't know if you guys have seen, but I've seen people walking with their phone like this, and they run into something like a pole or fall off the curb, right? The worst is when somebody is looking at their phone driving. And you pass them and you go, oh great, how much are you paying attention to the road? My children are the best gauge for the phone, I think. Even my 3-year-old, when he sees it, he fixates. That's all he wants. He wants to hold my phone. He calls it my phone. His phone, my phone. I have to put it away entirely because otherwise it is way too distracting. This is the type of thing that Jesus was referring to when he said that your heart might be weighed down with things that distract you. Drunkenness, dissipation, and anxieties of the world. These are the ways we are to not deal with waiting. We all know what drunkenness is, but dissipation, that's not a word that we use very often. I had to look it up. It has a very broad meaning, and it essentially means living life with a harmful self-indulgence. So, excessive drinking to the point of disgust. Excessive eating to the point of disgust. It was always a negative connotation. So dissipation is taking something and using it to the point where it's just, if someone were to walk in on you, oh, really bad. The essence of the meaning is that we're so focused on ourselves and on what we want that we don't have the eyes to see what God is doing. Sometimes it's a lot easier, I think, though, to numb ourselves, to distract ourselves, and to lose ourselves in something else. It could be alcohol, it could be a substance, but it doesn't really matter what it is, it matters what it does to you. So it could be shopping, television, games, reading. It doesn't really matter, your phone. The point is not what it is, but how it affects you. Does it keep you from noticing other people around you? Does it keep you from noticing God? For this is Jesus' caution. He doesn't want us to miss when he's showing up, when he's answering our prayers. He doesn't want us to miss when he's meeting our needs. He doesn't want us to miss the signs of the times. One of the ways that Jesus tells us to stay alert is to pray. This idea of alertness and prayer go together. Prayer keeps us alert, and alertness informs our prayer. It's kind of like a symbiotic relationship. They need each other. When we pray, we are awake to what God is doing in the world. Jesus tells us to pray that we might have strength to stand before the Son of Man when he returns. So our prayer is strengthening. And it is a conversation with God. It's engaging in a relationship with him that we might hear him and know him and receive from him and be changed. For he isn't leaving us alone in our waiting. He is with us. He has not left us. He is waiting for us. I'm reminded of Matthew 11:28-30. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Whatever we are waiting for right now, it is clear that there is a positive way to wait and a negative way to wait. Each of you is probably waiting for things that are much more significant than to have your call answered on a phone or get to your destination when you're driving. We have deep longings, profound needs, prayers that need to be heard. When Jesus calls his disciples and us to be watchful and prayerful, he is calling us to something significant. He is calling us into relationship with him. He wants to make sure that we are able to remain faithful and strong, steadfast, and attentive in relationship with him. He doesn't want us to run away when it gets hard. He wants us to run towards him when it gets hard. So we are to pray and be alert when the waiting is hard. And there's one more way that Jesus wanted us to wait well. We are helped in our waiting if we seek community. To wait well, I am convinced that we must be in community together. Jesus reminds us in Matthew chapter 18, for where 2 or 3 are gathered, there I am among them. So as we gather to pray together, even this morning to worship together, Jesus is here among us, and we are to be watchful and aware together. This allows for us to lift one another up in the dark days. It allows for Jesus to speak encouragement and love to us in times of need. It allows our prayers to be answered as Jesus meets us in the hands and feet of others. Jesus modeled this type of alertness, this type of prayer, and this type of community in the last verses of our passage. It seems a little bit disconnected. It says, every day Jesus was teaching in the temple, and at night he would go out and spend the night on the Mount of Olives, as it was called. And all the people would get up early in the morning to listen to him in the temple. These last 2 verses, I thought, how does this fit? It feels so disconnected. But then I realized it's Jesus' example of the very things he's just told us to do. He lived right on the edge. He knew that he needed prayer with the Father. So he went up to the Mount of Olives. He knew that he needed to be attentive and watchful. And he lived that through using his gifts of teaching in the temple and being in community with people. I think it is significant that the way that Jesus was on guard and paying attention helped him to wait well. As we are watchful and alert, we too need to remain engaged in community. We need to worship together, pray together, use our gifts and gather together. Jesus does not want us to be isolated and alone, but to be supported and held up. For together, he knows that we are stronger. Jesus climbed the Mount of Olives each evening. This was his prayer closet. It was where he went to be alone with the Father, to pray, to be encouraged, and to remain in relationship with God. He was empowered and strengthened to face what lay ahead. For him, it was arrest and trial and the cross. We have trials too, and we need to remain in relationship with God and with one another. We need prayer to be encouraged and empowered and strengthened in the face of what lies ahead of us, so that when the Son of Man returns, we will not miss it. We will receive the redemption that is waiting for us. As we practice these disciplines of watchfulness and community and regular prayer, we will find ourselves strengthened, strengthened with power from beyond ourselves, power from Jesus. Will you pray with me? Holy Spirit, will you empower us today? Fill us with your love. Give us the discipline that we need to remain watchful, to remain in community, to remain in relationship with you, and to pray at all times. We ask that you would help us to wait well. In the powerful name of Jesus, amen.